Yesterday, I was on Karen Hunter's show, and I got an inquiry from a reporter for the Griot, and there have been a bunch of inquiries and whatnot that I've been getting over the last week or so about racism and healthcare in the United States. And the reason why, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I published The Hidden History of American Healthcare, one of the books in the Hidden History series. There will be 10 of them when we're done next year. And in that book, there's actually it's about 3 chapters. It runs across about 3 chapters. The story of Frederick Hoffman. And what had happened was, last year when I was doing the virtual book tour for that book, Cenk Uygur had me on his program. Cenk's an old friend and colleague, with the Young Turks he started. And, I did a little riff about, how racism was why we don't have a national health care system. And somebody, and maybe it's Cenk, I'm not sure, somebody reposted it on TikTok and it went absolutely viral. And so I've been getting all these, press inquiries. So I thought, well, let's just pull this stuff out and lay it down. So I pulled out of my book on healthcare the story of Frederick Hoffman and how scientific racism, and I put that in scare quotes, is responsible for America not having a universal healthcare system. It's a rather long piece. It's probably the longest piece I've published. It's, I think it's around 3,000 words. But it tells the whole story, starting in the 1890s and going all the way up until the 1960s. Actually, in the 1980s, the Prudential Insurance Company was charging black people more than white people right up until 1984. And Frederick Hoffman was this guy who came over here from Germany back in the 1880s, late 1880s, early 1890s, as a 17-year-old. And he was very, very smart with numbers. And he was the guy who first published and proved an association between tobacco and lung cancer, between asbestos and mesothelioma, another form of lung cancer. It's what killed my father. Between a diet high in meat and processed foods and developing cancer. In fact, his book on diet about the association between meat and processed foods and cancer is still in print. He died in 1948. His book is still in, or 1946, I guess it was. And his book is still in print. But the book that really changed America that Frederick Hoffman wrote was called Race, Traits, and Tendencies of the American Negro. And in that book, he lays out his theory. It wasn't actually his theory. It was actually a widespread scientific theory in the 1890s that was called the race extinction hypothesis. And that was the theory that they put forward, was that black people are so genetically inferior to white people that if we white people simply denied black people health care for a generation or two, they will die out. And this was a widely held belief. It was based in Herbert Spencer's work. Frederick Hoffman was the main guy who popularized it. He traveled all over the United States. He spoke to state legislatures. He spoke to Congress. He rose all the way up to being vice president of the Prudential Insurance Company. He was the guy who, when Teddy Roosevelt wanted to have a national health care system, he was the guy who fought that with money from the Prudential Insurance Company. He was the guy who fought health insurance. Both Massachusetts and California, both those states, were going to have single-payer health care systems in the 19-teens. And Frederick Hoffman was the guy who stopped that in both those cases. And in all cases, he was doing this on behalf of the insurance companies because they did not want government-regulated or government-controlled, government-run, funded health insurance. They did not want a single-payer health care system. They wanted to be the ones getting the money. And the argument he made was that if you have a national health care system, that means black people are going to get health care. And if you give black people health care, then the race will not die out. They will have more babies, and you'll have more black people, and oh my God, that'll be a terrible thing for America. This was Frederick Hoffman's pitch. And Americans bought it, or at least white Americans bought it, in big numbers. And, just to boil it down, I mean, he over and over and over again, over a 40-year period, he was the guy who made sure that there was no national health care system for America. And that's why we are literally the only country in the developed world that does not declare that healthcare is a right and government has an obligation to provide that right. We're the only one. And it all goes back to so-called scientific racism. It's an amazing story. You can check it out. It's over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Scientific Racism, Why America Has No Universal Healthcare System. I think you're going to want to share it with your friends.